Hi, I'm Streaky from Streaky.com. Today I'm telling you how to prepare your tracks for mastering. So I'm Streaky. I've been a mastering engineer for the past 25 years, working on high-end stuff and low-end stuff and anything in between. I'm here to talk about audio equipment, sound in general, and how to get a better sound in your room, or how to present your music better and just basically get your music into the world, or listen to music in the best way possible. So how do you prepare your music before you come to a guy like me to master it? How you finish your mix and what do you do with it next? Now, let me just quickly run through the basics of what I would be looking for. Don't change the sample rate and don't change the bit depth, because basically you've probably got software that isn't going to do it that well, where I can play it in at the sample rate you've done it at. Say you've done it at 96. I can play it through my equipment at 96 and then capture again at 44.1, which is for CD, or 48, or whatever you want the sample rate to be at the end. 24-bit is always better to my ears rather than 16-bit. 16-bit really is only used for CD. If you're uploading to Spotify or any of those places, a 24-bit file will always sound better than a 16-bit file when you're uploading. I've done tests and there's some videos on that earlier in the series. So I would say from that point of view, that's how you're best to deliver it. Now, from a sound point of view, if you're worried about your mix, I just always think, just get the mix sounding the best it possibly can to your ears. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I'm totally against limiters. I'm totally against compression on the mix bus. I think if you're mixing into those when you're sort of leveling stuff and you're pushing into them and that's your sound, fine, that's your sound. If you take them off, the mix is going to fall apart, then there's no point in taking them off. But just make sure you're not clipping over the top and you're not going into the overs on a limiter. I mean, limiters are there to stop you going in the overs, but if you've got mix bus compression on and stuff, it's probably best, if you haven't got a limiter on the end, just to nudge it down so that you're giving a little bit of headroom to the mastering guy. But you really want to just get it sounding as good as you can in your room for how you think it should sound, because that's ultimately the best test. Because once you then send it to a mastering guy, then hopefully they're just going to take it to the next level, or as I always say, they won't have to do anything because your mix will be so fantastic that all they've got to do is turn it up, make sure it's at the right level, make sure there's no mistakes or any corrections they need to do, because a mastering engineer is kind of the final place before it goes out into the world. So it's just right, is the phase okay in the track? Is the bass holding together? Are there excessive highs? Is it going to vinyl? Then there's a load of parameters for that. Is it going to a streaming service? Then okay, how's it going to sound on the streaming service? This is what a mastering guy is there for. He's there to make sure that your mix that you've got sounding the best possible is still going to carry on and translate in the real world. So that's all the skills a mastering engineer brings to the situation. It's not just all their kind of compression and limiting and EQ, that's just part of it. And really what you're trying to do there is just enhance. You're not trying to take away. So you're always A-Bing against the track to make sure that it sounds how the mix was. So then all you're doing is trying to translate that into the real world to how the artist viewed it, not how the mastering engineer viewed it. Really, that's kind of how I would say, just get the mix sounding good. Now, if you're a little bit worried about your mix and you want the kind of mastering guy to get a little bit more creative on it, and you just want to say, okay, I'm in a room where I can't really hear the bass, can't really hear what's going on. Now, I would always say just leave the bass to leave the mastering engineer to tighten that up. You know, the mastering engineer, if he's got more bass, you can kind of mold the bass and you can do some low cuts and some higher cuts above it, and you can compress it a bit and whatever you need to do just to kind of sort of, get that in a clay and kind of mold it. Now, if you've left it where it's lighter in the bass, then the mastering engineer, to get it up to the sort of sound that you're trying to achieve in the outside world, has got to add bass to it. Then it's kind of like clay, where you're adding bits of clay on and they kind of fall off and it just doesn't work. It doesn't glue together well enough. So always good to leave a touch more bass on, or if you're a bit scared, just leave mastering guide to do that. It's easier to get that bass sounding nice and tight in mastering than it is if you haven't really got the room or the speakers to be able to hear that super low stuff, and also sort of to feel the sort of separation between the kick and the bass guitar and things like that. Now, the top end is always easier to add. So it's the opposite to the low end. So it's always easier and better if I'm using some nice analog EQs. Now, yeah, plug-in EQs, there's some out there that do sound quite nice in the tops, but a nice analog EQ just to bring the tops up and just to add a little bit more kind of air is always nice. There's no need for you to have it super bright coming out the mix But like I say, if you're confident and you like the sound of your mix, then cool. Then there's no need for the mastering engineer to add any more top. Usually when you start pushing things through limiters, it starts getting brighter anyway, because the bass is getting a little bit more compressed, because obviously the bass is taking up more of the level, more of the more of the energy. So by the time you start taking some of that energy out, it starts thinning it out, so it starts feeling brighter in the top end. So that's the mastering engineer's job, is to be able to take it to that level, but also keep it with the bass that it started with. That's kind of the thing you're fighting a lot as a mastering engineer. It's kind of, the top end's very easy. A cheap trick with mastering is just to put loads of top on it, because it's a real, it's an easy thing. But that's also a massive tell for you as a mix engineer if the mastering engineer is just a little bit shoddy, because you'll just come back with a really bright mix. Because it sounds more open, but if you actually level match them against each other to actually A/B between the two, you'll find that the tops are just too bright. If your mix is quite good, it's just very easy shiny objects kind of trick to do. So the main thing is to kind of get it as good as you can get, and then keep the sample rate and the bit depth exactly the same as what you've done it in. There's no point in you doing conversion, because that's going to process it again and add more nonsense to it. If your mix is going into limiters, keep it that way. If you've got more bass on there, leave it on there. If you're a bit scared, at least give references and things to the mastering engineer. It's always handy. I've worked with mastering engineers before where they'll throw you out the room for giving them a reference, but I love to get a reference. The main problem for me these days is understanding where people's gauge is on level and output. So when it goes out into the world, do they want it really loud? Do they want it smashed? Do they want it sounding like this? Or do they want it really dynamic and really quiet? Now, most people, you'll do something that sounds really dynamic and everyone says, oh, the loudness war. I hate the loudness war, but it's absolute nonsense, because everybody wants their track loud. I could give someone a track and they're being all kind of posh and saying, yeah, I want it really dynamic. I love all that kind of warmth and space. But it's like, yeah, that's fine, but I'm going to give it back to you and you're going to ask me for another 5 dBs on it. So really, you need to give references to the mastering guy as well, so that he can understand what sort of level you're trying to achieve. Because if you do want it dynamic, there's no reason why you still can't get that level, because with a few EQ tweaks here and there, you can actually get it perceived to be louder, but it isn't actually louder. Or you can actually chop into the mix a little bit here and there to get that level, so that it's still the level, but it's still got that kind of dynamic range and that feel. Sometimes it's kind of a fix of the ear that you can do, kind of a little trick on the ear, but that's just a bit of experience needed there to get that. But yeah, it's very important. So references, very good. Now, mastered tracks, do I like you to send me something that's mastered? So if you've got the mix and you aren't mixing into a limiter, but you've done a limited version for the A&R guy or somebody, I get stuff from record labels all the time. They always give me a limited version, because most mix engineers these days have to deliver a mix with it limited. So I will always get, if it's from a label or a big artist, I will get their limited version, which is superb, because most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I can certainly get it to that level, and usually I can get it sounding better. But it's a great benchmark for me to push against, because I know that everybody's listened to that track and they've all listened to the limited version. They're all loving it. So as soon as I go back and they level match mine against theirs, it's going to sound better. But also when they don't level match it, I'm still louder, or I'm still kind of in the same place as them. So it's always handy if you have got a limited version that's got, that is a kind of reference that everyone's listening to. That's handy to have as well. So a lot of this stuff is to do with unattended sessions. If you are attending, then obviously you're there to be able to guide the mastering engineer whilst you're there. But really, most people are unattended these days. So by sending off information, by telling them a lot of stuff of what you're looking for, that helps the mastering engineer achieve your goals and try and get you the sound that you want to get, so that you can achieve, what you want out of it, really. And that's the ultimate thing, is the mastering guy is there to get your sound, not his sound. So let me just quickly run through all those again. Leave bass on. Don't add any tops if you don't need to, because you can get those sounding better in the mastering, less processy kind of high-end tiz. I would say, leave the sample rate and bit depth the same. Reference tracks, send reference tracks to the mastering engineer, your limited version, and reference tracks of what you've been listening to whilst you've been making stuff. So yeah, that's it. So use all those things. Hopefully they'll help you get a better master. If you like this kind of content, please ring the bell so you get notified when I upload. Let me know in your comments any questions that you've got. Hashtag #AskStreaky for any questions, and I'll do a Q&A on that at some point. And if you want me to master, there is a code below for getting this far. Thanks for watching. Bye.